Welcome to the conference of PhillipCapital India, sir. My name is Vineet Bhatnagar. I run the business of PhillipCapital in India and UAE. Deeply appreciate that you could take time. We have some of our institutional clients in the room, and the purpose of this entire session is to have your views on a couple of recent topics. Allow me to introduce you to our guests here. Most of us know Mr. Amitabh Kant very well. He's presently India's G20 Sherpa. The G20 or the Group of 20 is a forum, as we know, where policymakers of industrialized and developing economies meet to discuss key issues in the global economy. The best way to introduce Mr. Amitabh Kant is that he's a governance reformer and a public policy change agent for India for the last many, many decades, having driven key reforms and initiatives during his tenure as the CEO of NITI Aayog, the apex policymaking body of Indian government, and the Secretary of DIPP. He has been a key driver of some of the flagship national initiatives such as Startup India, Incredible India, Make in India, Kerala God's Own Country, and the Aspirational Districts Program. These initiatives, we believe, have repositioned India, which is widely recognized as transformation. The NITI Aayog, where Prime Minister is the chairman, Mr. Amitabh Kant has driven a vast range of national level development and policy initiatives which catalyze India's social and economic development and have brought a paradigm shift in policy making. Before coming to NITI Aayog and DIPP, he was also the CEO of Delhi Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development Corporation and the CMD before that of ITDC. Mr. Amitabh Kant is the author of many books such as Branding India, An Incredible Story, Incredible India 2.0. He was the editor of The Path Ahead, Transformative Ideas for India. Presently, he is a member of the steering board of Shaping the Future of Production Systems of World Economic Forum and also a champion of the Edison Alliance of the WEF. Mr. Kant did his schooling from Model School Delhi, graduated in economics from St. Stephen's, and finished his master's degree from Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is a Chevening scholar and undertook midterm courses at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard and also at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad.
Thank you for that introduction. I'll be very brief, and I'll then get into question answers. I'm truly delighted to be in the midst of all of you. It gives me great pleasure to be addressing the participants on what it will take to become a $5 trillion economy. Over the next 5 fiscals, actually, the Indian economy is projected to grow at an annual rate of 6.8%, driven by increases in capital and productivity. In my view, this growth rate of 6.8% is not adequate. We should grow at even higher rates. An average rate of 8% over the next 3 decades is critical. This is critical because if you look at the past, actually, economies in other parts of Asia have grown at high rates. Post-World War II, Japan grew at about 10% for over 2 decades. If you look at Korea during 60 and 90 grew at about 9.6%. Taiwan has grown at 9.3% for over 3 decades. And in recent times, from between 1990 and 2010, China has grown at about 10%. So it's important to understand the difference between growing at 6%, 8%, 10%. If India grows at 6%, your total GDP will be about in 2047 will be about 16.4 trillion. That means that you will take your per capita income from about $2,500 at present to about $10,000. But if you grow at about 8%, your GDP will go to about 20.6 trillion, which is you'll take the per capita income to 14,000. But if you grow at about 10%, your GDP will be in the region of about 33 trillions, which means that your per capita income will be about $22,000. And therefore, growing at high rates means at about 10% means that you would have lifted everybody above the poverty line. You would have really transformed India. And therefore, our ambition needs to be much higher. And other countries have done it, so there's no reason why India should not do it. The challenge there is that at present, our investment to GDP ratio stands at about 29% of GDP. And investment needs to rise to between about 35% of GDP to sustain growth rates of 8% level for years, and needs to grow to about 38% for India to grow at about 10%. And it's important that investment would also mean that savings must go up, and savings are critical for the economy to enable investments to grow up. Now, savings also need to rise to about 35% of your GDP. But for investment, first, public investments can be raised through two sources. First, public investment in infrastructure with a very large multiplier effect will be key in kick-starting the investment growth cycle of the economy. It crowds in private investment. That's what the government of India is doing by putting in, it's taken the capital outlay to about a huge 150% growth over the last 3 years. The second way is that the investment cycle can be boosted through increasing demand, both internal, that is consumer demand, and external through exports. Now, to achieve this, we need efforts from all of you, from companies with high growth, differentiated business, and the institutional investor community will all be very extremely critical to unlock India's economic growth potential. It's important that to understand that in the last few years, we've done a lot of work. We've built about 40 million houses, which is like making a house for every single person in Australia. We've built about 110 million toilets, which is like making a toilet for every person in Germany. We've provided piped water connection to 243 million individuals in India, which is like providing a water connection to every citizen of Brazil. And we've done about 55,000 kilometers of roads. And our approach has been also that we carry out vast reforms in the economy. So you've seen the goods and services tax, which has replaced about 28 different taxes and cesses. You've seen the insolvency and bankruptcy code. You've seen the RERA coming in, which has brought in discipline in the land and real estate sector. But more important is that we brought the corporate tax to low levels, and the huge improvement in the balance sheet that you are seeing is because the government of India decided to do away with 1,45,000 crores so that investment could take place, and the balance sheet of the companies has demonstrated this. But the other big thing that's happened in India is that digitization has taken place in a very big way. We were able to provide digital identity to every Indian. We were able to provide bank accounts. We were able to link bank accounts with identity and then push for fast payments. And today, we use our mobile to do all the fast payments. And we do 11x more payments than what USA and UK do. We do 4x more than what China does. We do about 46% of the real-time payment. And we then move to credit, which is paperless, cashless. Many young startups, when we started the Startup India movement in 2016, there were only 400 odd startups. Today, there are about over 1 lakh of startups. We have over 110 unicorns. And all of them, many of them have gone to provide credit, paperless, cashless. Many of them have spread the stock market into rural areas, tier 2, tier 3 cities to an extent where, if you look at Zerodha, Grow, Upstart, all of them have reached out to tier 2, tier 3 cities, and a startup like Zerodha controls about 28% of the stock market. And then you have now insurance companies which are doing paperless, cashless insurance. So Go Digit, Acco, all of them. These are all young startups who really transformed India. So digitization is progressing at a breakneck speed, and we are already seeing and experiencing the other big thing, which is the impact of climate change. So my view is that India has to go digital, India has to go green. India cannot grow on the back of burning fossil fuels anymore. And therefore, the countries which will be best able to capitalize on the technologies and enable to leapfrog into the new era of growth and prosperity will be those which go digital, which go green. And India's robust digital infrastructure developed over the past decade has already set the stage for efficiency gains. If you look at, in particular, the development of Aadhaar, all this, it has aided growth to new startups and private sector companies in the financial sector, because the cost of acquisition to the customer, to the companies has fallen, the cost of acquisition of a customer. And that is why when Jio started operations in India, it could acquire 300 million people in 100 days, because the cost of acquisition of customer had fallen down to just $1 per customer. If you do paperwork, if you do all kind of bureaucratic procedure, it takes you, the cost of customer is about $30. It had fallen down to $1. And now, now India is opening up with a growth model that does not exploit the environment. So we've done about 175 gigawatt of green energy. We are using the opportunity to industrialize without carbonizing. And this is a huge, huge change, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity because future growth will all come from digital and green companies, and their values will rise. They will be able to attract capital, those which go digital and green. And we are sitting at a very unique leadership position to drive climate-oriented outcomes, where we are the only G20 country in the top 10 rankings of the Climate Change Performance Index. We also achieved our NDC targets, which we had committed to in Paris 9 years ahead of schedule. And this is where India has an advantage. We've successfully built a globally competitive digital economy. We are now building a globally competitive renewable energy industry. We can be the leaders in both digitization and the global green story. We are also pushing for the green hydrogen mission. And therefore, with proactive collaboration between innovators, entrepreneurs, government, green hydrogen has the potential to drastically reduce CO2 emissions, reduce energy imports, and save foreign exchange. But more important, India can become a champion of green hydrogen. So many of these sectors, the sunrise sectors of growth, we brought in the production-linked incentives scheme. We brought in PLI in areas like mobile manufacturing, hardware manufacturing, battery storage, electric mobility, because our belief is that these are sunrise sectors of growth. So genomics, AI, clean and connected mobility, green hydrogen, advanced chemistry, cell batteries, solar panels, electrolyzer, green steel, many of these will enable India to leapfrog into the sunrise sectors of growth. And this is where we need to take a huge, huge move forward, and private sector companies need to spend more on R&D to really drive growth. When we were conceptualizing PLI, when I was in NITI Aayog, I always encourage my colleague to be futuristic in their thinking. And my belief is that clean technologies and sunrise sectors of growth that will enable a new era of prosperity in India's growth story. And we have today, what has happened is that Indian companies in many of these areas are taking a lead and are moving forward. And what we've demonstrated is that focused development on production-linked incentive schemes for advanced chemistry, cell battery storage, solar panels, and all this will give India a quantum jump forward. These are areas which are going to be the future areas of growth. So my belief is that India needs to fire its cylinders on all areas, not merely services sector, but on services, manufacturing. We need urbanization in a very big way, sustainable urbanization. And we also need to do enhance our productivity in agriculture. And all this, I believe, in all these areas, I believe that climate transition will be the greatest commercial opportunity of our age. And it is critical that we mobilize much more private sector capital in these areas. I've also been a long-term believer that clean tech focused and impact fund managers increasing their allocation to companies focused on energy transition, including storage and green hydrogen, will be critical. Similarly, pump storage could be one of the other areas that the private sector can focus on for long-term returns from India's net zero ambitions and progress. I've always been a believer that it's the private sector which will drive growth. The government has invested hugely in infrastructure, but my belief is that the government must get out of many of these areas after creating the infrastructure, because private sector is better at operation and maintenance. And therefore, the benefits of India's rapid growth in many of these areas will be possible if we are able to push for private sector operation and maintenance. So we've seen the benefits of India's rapid growth in the telecommunication revolution, which has been evident over the last 2 decades. The climate transition offers India a similar opportunity to technologically advance across multiple sectors: smart and decentralized grids, energy efficient green buildings, infrastructure, mobility, energy generation, and agriculture. And India's digital push together with its green growth ambition will have multiplier effects in ensuring that we have a sustained long-term growth in the decades to follow. And this will unlock India's full economic potential sustainably. The private sector must lead India's economic transition to achieve a $5 trillion economy. As I said, all these sectors need to really fire on their cylinder, but exports will be critical. I've been a believer that size and scale of manufacturing is critical, and therefore the PLI aims at building in size and scale. The current upheaval in the global economy actually affords India the chance to establish itself as an integral part of global value chain. And that would mean that India must become the most productive nation in the economy. We must become highly competitive. So the world today needs greener, sustainable, digital, and climate resilient global value chains. And Indian businesses should leverage the timing as world moves away from China. Micro, small, and medium enterprises represent about 90% of businesses and more than 50% of employment worldwide. And we need to truly integrate them in our global value chains. I would also say that exports will be critical, because whenever India has grown, it has grown on the back of exports. And therefore, if we are globally competitive, we'll be able to penetrate global markets. Our share of the global exports is still very low. And if we are able to push for greater exports, it will be a very big thing. Ladies and gentlemen, business in the manufacturing space will also have to look at transforming their supply chains. We will have to seek to leverage the latest technologies such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, big data analytics, smart manufacturing, and cybersecurity in all their processes. The Indian semiconductor market is expected to reach about $55 billion by 2026. And India's recent semiconductor mission is a great step towards developing India's local semiconductor manufacturing capability. So let me say that we need to push for greater and greater R&D so that we become globally hugely competitive. As PLI starts giving you results in the next 3 to 4 years, you will see that R&D will play a critical role. Our spend on R&D is still very low at 0.6%. In contrast, South Korea's R&D is 4.5% of GDP and China's 2.1% of GDP. And therefore, the PLI in a range of sectors, and then PLI in semiconductor, in green hydrogen, in electrolyzer manufacturing are great opportunities to make India the global champion in many of these emerging areas of growth. So I am a great believer that much like we've been able to build the world's best digital public infrastructure model that is open source, open API, and is interoperable, we should become the global champion in climate change. And we should also push for, in a very big way, to succeed as a manufacturing powerhouse, because India has to grow with job creation and with size and scale of manufacturing. And therefore, India is investing in physical infrastructure. We've eased the regulatory environment in a very, very big way. So much action has taken place at the central government level. There are 3 or 4 things I'd like to say, which are challenges, which are critical. Firstly, I am a strong believer that while reforms have taken place at the central government level, we need to push for reforms at the state levels now. We need to ensure that states are very good at ease of doing business, in taxation, in protecting property rights, and reducing bureaucratic red tape. Secondly, urbanization will be a very, very big opportunity for India, and we should be able to do sustainable urbanization. Thirdly, it's very important that while we grow, we should also focus on social sectors, that is education, health, nutrition, and our outcomes in these sectors need to improve radically. And if that improves, we will vigorously be able to create the skilled labor force. And that is important because our demographics is very young. We are amongst the youngest countries in the world. And even when we are at 75 in 2047, our average age will only be about 35. So almost 30% of the skilled manpower of the world will be provided by India because of its young demographics. So ladies and gentlemen, going ahead, my belief is that government should retreat from areas in which it has no business being in, both central and state government. The role of government must evolve into being a facilitator, an enabler of growth, and investing in infrastructure and social sectors. This is a great opportunity because India is hosting G20. India's the Prime Minister is the leader of the world. And this is an opportunity really to demonstrate, as our Prime Minister said, that our presidency will be decisive, inclusive, outcome-oriented, and also action-oriented. And that is what we are doing. G20 has provided us with an opportunity to showcase our economic progress, our diplomatic influence, and commitment to global governance. It has also allowed India to demonstrate its leadership role among emerging economies and emerge as the voice of the global South. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by saying that there are 4 global trends, as one of the Morgan Stanley report has said: demographics, digitization, decarbonization, and deglobalization. All of them are favoring India. This is a great opportunity, really, for India to accelerate the pace of its growth, to truly accelerate and become a leader in global economy. And that would require all of you to play a key role in both ensuring that we do sustained growth over a long period of time and we achieve our target of $5 trillion economy, because rapid growth is the key to really enhancing per capita income for Indians. And this would require private sector to be a key driver of India's growth story. With these few words, I'll conclude, but I've been a great believer that engaging businesses and investors enables the sharing of best practices of fostering innovation and promoting sustainable business models. And I'm glad that PhillipCapital is doing it. I take this opportunity of complimenting PhillipCapital and Mr. Bhatnagar in taking this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kant. Indeed, a very impressive overview of the current thinking in New Delhi. In fact, I must compliment you and your colleagues in laying down a singular focus on growth. I think the address that you shared with us this morning laid out the multi-dimensional approach to the growth as well as opportunities in multi-sector. The ladies and gentlemen in this room are a part of the ecosystem, which is institutional investment, essentially channelizing the domestic savings into both public and private markets. So I open the floor to those who are present today to ask you a few questions, and then we will take this session forward. Please, open to the floor. Please.
Sir, I represent industry. I'm not an institutional investor, but I represent industry from pharmaceuticals I am beneficiary of one of the first PLI scheme that you introduced as the chairman of NITI Aayog. We got allotted some of the bulk drugs in fermentation technology. But the challenge what we have been facing and what personally I feel is that the industry requires a lot of R&D support from government and the part of the infrastructure that the government has created so far. A lot of CSIR laboratories are available, a lot of universities have a lot of capabilities, but none of those R&D supports are available to the industry. Whether the government can come out with a policy which can bring about collaboration between industry, which is what has caused the growth in the United States, Europe, and lately in China. So your views on this would be appreciated.
So you're right. I totally agree with it, and my belief is that the mistake we made in earlier years was that we created autonomous institutions like CSIR, and there are a large number of labs, etc., across the country without putting them in academic institutions. They should have been all part of academic institutions, because worldwide, all new industries, all innovation, they all come from universities. They come from the research which takes place in the university leads to young students become innovators, they become entrepreneurs. So actually, my belief is that all these CSIR labs should be fully opened up to the private sector, which in a way has now been done. But more than that, to slowly pass on leadership of this as far as the innovation bit of it is concerned to the private sector. Because I'm a believer that India can never grow at high rates of 9 to 10% without the private sector driving growth. The governments must be very, very get out of all areas of business. Government must be a facilitator, a catalyst, and in R&D in particular, we should work with the private sector. But having said that, I would also say that large private sector companies in India do not spend adequately on R&D. They should also spend on R&D. As I gave you the example of South Korea, etc., a lot of resources are put in on R&D. If you have to be a global champion, if you have to move from a generic to value added in pharmaceutical sector, we can't remain a generic producer all our lifetime. We need to penetrate more into value-added products, and that would require R&D. But if there is anything we need to do to open up more of our CSR labs for the private sector, we'll be very happy to work with you and take it forward and open them up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Please.
So this is Anjali. I work with PhillipCapital. So my question is related to the point that you mentioned that the government should not be or should retrieve from certain sectors and give space to the private sector. So which ones do you think will come initially, where you feel that there is sufficient space that government can retrieve from and then private sector can take in? And where I'm coming from is that, you know, for strategic disinvestment has not been that easy for the last many years. Of course, we have moved forward with Air India, and now probably IDBI Bank will happen, but it's a problem in itself. So I wanted to get your thoughts where all there is space for the government to exist.
My belief is that the government should have done more of strategic disinvestment. We should have pushed harder. That's one area where much more could have been achieved. I also believe that we should do more and more of asset monetization. While government is spending money on capital investment, the government should allow private sector to operate. If we could attract investments into airports and create world-class airports, there's no reason why we should not do this in many other areas. And all roads which are made by National Highway Authority should actually be put out. We should do asset monetization of all these roads. All of them should be private sector operated and maintained. Similarly, warehouses built over the years, you'll get if you want India to become a productively efficient economy, all these areas need to be opened up to the private sector. So the more we open up for operation and maintenance, all that the government has built up, you'll see better productive efficiency and better productive efficiency. But all this should be done in a transparent, competitive manner. It's important to do this in a very competitive, transparent manner. allow private sector to do operation and maintenance of all assets that government is building up right now.
And so, what about the banking sector? Do you think government should retrieve from
The government had actually in its budget 2 years back had announced that it will privatize 2 banks and it will privatize 1 insurance company. The recommendation for the banks and the insurance company had been made by NITI Aayog to the government. That privatization process is still underway. Could have been done quicker and faster, but I think it will probably happen after the next elections. So we should wait and watch. But several of the public sector banks have not fully digitized. If you're not a digital bank anymore, it will be very difficult to survive. Banks, because in this age of digitization, only banks which are fully digital banks will survive. And therefore, my view is that there'll be a huge value erosion if we don't do this over a period of time. And therefore, there is a need to fulfill the commitment made by the government in the budget, and I think it should happen. It's a complex process because the acts and laws need to be changed. The Banking Act needs to be changed. So it's in that process of going to the parliament, etc. But I think probably after elections, you'll see much greater stress on privatization.
I would just like to ask one more additional question. On the question of R&D spent by large companies, you mentioned that large companies should spend more. That's a desirable goal. But what about MSME industry, sir? You mentioned 90% of the businesses are from MSME. I would think that the right way, like in China currently, I've been recently there, most of the academic institutions of the government are working hand in hand with the private MSME industry and give the latest state of art technology. Can something of that sort be done by government of India?
So actually all these CSIR labs, all the labs that we built up and all the academic institutions that we built up should work with MSMEs. It's important that we work very closely with MSMEs because they are a very major driver of growth. They are also, you can't have growth without jobs, and MSMEs are very big drivers of job creation. So I'm a great believer in MSMEs, and I think all the focus of the government labs should be in working in partnership with the private sector, particularly the MSMEs. But it's also important to understand that, MSMEs will not grow without a very large companies coming. India creating very large companies. You see, when Maruti became a large company, you had tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 producers. And India needs to create large-scale global champions also to penetrate global economy. That's also important. So both government labs need to work with private sector. We also need to create large companies. So with these few words, I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
In your opinion, what would be those 1 or 2 points that India will ultimately be able to drive through in India's favor through our presidentship in G20? What do you think that are going to be those substantial 2-3 things that are going to last us for the next decade?
So these are very challenging times for the world because 1/3 of the world is in recession and Germany has just gone into recession. The post-COVID era has seen about 200 million people going into poverty. 100 million people have lost their jobs. We are seeing 75 countries of the world facing a global debt crisis. So I think the challenge before the world is to really accelerate the pace of growth. It's also a huge challenge to ensure greater flow of resources into emerging markets because the emerging markets are growing. There's a growth slowdown in developed part of the world, but the emerging markets are growing at a higher rate. So 2 or 3 key things which India will be able to drive during its presidency. Well, first and foremost, we'll be able to demonstrate the power of India's digital public infrastructure. And it's important that while we've been able to build up identity, we've been able to use digital identity for banks and for fast payments. The world has about 4 billion people who do not have identity. We've seen 2 billion people do not even have a bank account. And about almost 133 countries in the world do not have fast payments. So we'll use this opportunity to push the Indian model of digital public infrastructure to the rest of the world. That will be important. But we will also use this opportunity to work in partnership with the rest of the world to drive growth, to drive sustainable development goals, to drive reforms in the multilateral institutions, and to drive technological developments. All these are critical.
Just a quick follow-up to that, sir. You've touched upon this earlier also. You think that the existing setup that we have globally in terms of multilateral agencies, are good enough or need to be changed in a substantial manner to support the way we want us, the way we envisage India to grow? Do you think that it's even possible?
No, multilateral institutions need to be reformed. They do direct lending. They can do 10x more lending if they do indirect lending. They do blended finance if they do first loss guarantees, if they do credit enhancement. They can do 10x more lending. So these institutions were formed post-World War II during the Bretton Woods regime. They are not suited for lending for sustainable development goals. They are not suited for lending for climate finance. So they need a restructuring, they need a redesign, they need a reform. All that the G20 India's presidency has pushed for in a very big way.
Sir, you talked about the success of the PLI in the mobile manufacturing, as is all visible to us. In your mind, are there any other new initiatives relating to PLI that are coming in other sectors that we should all watch out for?
No, PLI has been done in 14 sectors, plus it was done for green hydrogen, plus semiconductor. PLI should not be indiscriminately used across many other sectors. That's not the route. The route is, the way out is to carry out more and more reforms. The way out is to bring in ease of doing business, make yourself productively efficient. PLI is for a limited period of 5 years in the emerging areas of growth, so that we can build size and scale of manufacturing and become globally competitive. I think these sectors are more than adequate. Bringing in more and more sectors will be counterproductive in this. So 14 sectors itself is a lot of sectors. Then we took it to green hydrogen. We've taken it to semiconductors. These are all critical areas for India to become a global champion. Beyond this, PLI is not required in many more areas, to my mind.
Understood.
PLI is really about becoming a global champion and bringing size and scale of manufacturing. You can't do this. This is not PLI is meant to make up for your disadvantages for 4 to 5 years till you become globally competitive. But the end objective should be that India must become globally competitive in 5 or 6 key areas of growth to become a global champion. That's the way.
Hi,
One last
question to you. Just quickly, your thoughts on the India including in the bond index. What do you think? Because we need capital for the private sector also. So will this come through at the end of the day?
Can you repeat that? Because I did not
India including in the bond index?
Yeah. So my view is that India should be included in the bond index. My view is that there are a range of areas where India will make its presence felt. As for the critical thing for that to happen is that India must continue to grow over a period of time. If India continues to grow at rates of 8 to 9%, as I said, over a period of time, India will have a much greater economic voice. India will have a much greater political voice. India will have a much greater global voice. All this is a function of your growth. And the key to my mind is economic growth and prosperity over a 3-decade period. And that's why I stress that growing at 6.8% is not adequate. India needs to grow at 8 to 9% over a 3-decade period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We will conclude the session here. Once again, PhillipCapital and all my colleagues, thank you for spending time. Compliments to you. Under your leadership, there have been instrumental changes in policy making in New Delhi, and we all congratulate you and your team. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.